Ready, Chris? Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, June 13th, 8 a.m., and we will resume the meeting of the Oregon Water Resources Commission. And we're going to pick up this morning on the agenda item G, the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area Update from Chris Coates.
All right, good morning, Chair Klims, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Chris Coates. I'm the North Central Region Manager for the Oregon Water Resources Department. My panel members introduce themselves as well.
Chair Klims, commissioners, I'm Laura Gleim, representing the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality.
Chair Klims and members of the commission, I'm Courtney Cole. I'm the Regional Solutions Coordinator for Eastern Oregon for the Governor's Office.
Isn't Kevin online yet? No. Well, we're also joined, at least partially online, by Kevin Finn with the Department of Agriculture, but we'll get started, and hopefully by the time we get to Kevin's slides, he's able to speak. Yeah.
I'm here now. Good morning. Thanks, Chris. Kevin Fenn, I'm the Water Quality and Stormwater Conservation District Program Manager at Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Thanks, Kevin. So we have 45 minutes for our presentation and questions today, and there's a lengthy history in the Lower Umatilla Basin for lots of groundwater quality and quantity issues that our department and the agencies my colleagues here represent have been working on for more than 30 years now, both with the GWAMA and with the 4 critical groundwater areas that are all situated in the Lower Umatilla Basin. We're going to give a bit of an abridged background just because we want to focus most of our presentation on the work that the agencies are doing to reduce nitrate contamination in the groundwater in the lower basin. But just so we are all kind of starting from the same place, the GWAMA itself was formed over 30 years ago to address nitrate contamination under DEQ statute, which Laura can maybe talk more about it during her slides. There's in that statutory framework, there's a process by which an advisory committee is formed, which has existed in different configurations over those years. Where we are today and where we've been on the trajectory that we've been on for the last 5 or so years is one where the state agencies, with the leadership of the governor and the governor's office, have taken a more active role in managing the process, the setting up framework, and identifying strategies that we think really move the needle on the long-term work we have in front of us to lower nitrate contamination in the Lower Umatilla Basin. We're going to get into the kind of short and long-term strategies here in just a few slides, but we could spend a lot of time going through all the history in the GWAMA. That's about as far into the weeds as I was going to get this morning, and we're going to focus most of our time on kind of where we're headed in the work we've done over the last few years.
So I think I'm up. So like Chris mentioned, the GWAMA has been in existence for about 30 years, and the agencies, primarily Water Resources, Department of Agriculture, DEQ, and OHA, have all been working with the local community and together over those past 30 years. But I would say over the past 2 to 3 years, there's been a much more concerted effort to bring those agencies together for more coordination in interagency work and really start to address both long-term and short-term needs. So when Governor Kotek came into office, we started a really aggressive initial push particularly around safe drinking water. So OHA is really the lead on that. That's not what we're going to really talk about this morning, but I do want to just acknowledge that that was really the initial priority once Governor Kotek came into office, was addressing safe drinking water. So that included well tests, free well tests, free filters for those homes that had drinking water standards that were unsafe and
The virtual audience is saying they're having struggles hearing the presenters. Microphones are all on, but if you could just project more into the TV.
In terms of the safe drinking water, so that includes well tests, water delivery, and also some filters for those homes. That work continues today, but I would also say that the National Resource Agencies, the Water Resources, Department of Agriculture, and DEQ have been working very closely over the past couple of years to really take the government's direction around creating a long-term plan around how to reduce nitrate contamination in Oklahoma. So we have worked also in coordination with OHA to develop the nitrate reduction plan. We've also been working really closely with EPA. EPA has been a key federal partner over the past few years. We've had quarterly meetings with them. They were very engaged with the state agencies and the state as we're developing the nitrate reduction plan. And that is really now the kind of key North Star plan that we are really using to address nitrate reduction and kind of a long-term plan for the Oklahoma. That is something we're also in close coordination with the local Oklahoma Advisory Committee, and it's sort of a living document that we see as being able to be added to as we move forward. So right now, that nitrate reduction plan was, I think it was last September, it was formally introduced, and we're continuing to now implement that plan and have annual updates to that plan moving forward. So I'm going to leave it to my agency partners. Our office continues to play a key sort of coordination role with bringing agencies together, but we also have ODA, DEQ, and Water Resources are working closely. Oh, there goes the microphone. You guys can hear me now. They're working closely together to kind of jointly work on this and jointly help move the local advisory committee together. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I think, Laura. Oh, no, Chris.
Good to hear more from me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of the nitrate reduction plan, the roles and responsibilities in the plan, and how we've began to implement the plan over the last number of years. So this graphic helps describe the roles and responsibilities of the different agencies working in the Loeb Guama on this issue. So you'll see ODA, DEQ, and Water Resources there. First, so the natural resource agencies in the respective areas that we work in the Guama. We also work really closely with OHA and DHS. They're more focused on safe drinking water deliveries, installation of filters where that's possible and folks are interested in doing that. And then we also are closely collaborating with both Morrow and Umatilla County. So there is a nexus there with land use planning, septic regulations, other public health responsibilities of the counties. So this is EPA's, I would say, the only government entity missing from this graphic. We do meet with EPA, well, now quarterly, to just, at first it was describing how we were going to come up with the plan and what was going to be in the plan. Now we meet with them to talk about how we're implementing the plan. And then we do that quarterly, and now moving forward, we'll give them kind of an annual report at the end of each year on our work to implement the nitrate reduction plan. There's a link here and a QR code if you'd like to download the plan. It's a short 150-page read or so. We just have on here the sections of the plan. We're not going to subject you to actually looking at the plan itself. But this was really authored by the 4 agencies that you see there with a lot of input from EPA and the governor's office. The section, there's a collaborative governance section that details how we're all going to work together. We have signed an MOU between the 3 natural resource agencies, detailing how we're going to kind of all co-manage this work. long-term. There's the strategies by source. So we have identified under that section specific programs that we have either ongoing or are developing to reduce nitrate inputs. And then there's the kind of the science section. So the monitoring data and analysis. So what are the agencies doing to continue to collect, analyze, and interpret data? How we're going to further our understanding of the situation, really how nitrate is presenting itself in the aquifer systems in the lower basin. We have a pretty our viewscape of the nitrate contamination based on the work that OHA has done is really looking at the contamination two-dimensionally. So we see wells on the landscape that have tested high, but there's still some work we need to do to understand why a grouping of wells, maybe of 10 wells, why 6 of them test high and 4 don't when they're all in two-dimensionally in proximity to one another. So we're looking at well construction, depth to water, seal, the things that may be contributing to why some wells are testing different than others. And then the last section is the work that OHA is continuing to do to ensure that folks have clean drinking water at their homes. So this just talks a little bit more about those short and long-term goals that we are working on in the GWAMA. And so the 3 natural resource agencies work very closely together. We also work with our OHA and DHS counterparts more broadly in the work that we're doing in the GWAMA. The OHA and DHS efforts, as we've mentioned, is really the short to medium term obligation to make sure that people have clean drinking water at their homes. Understanding that the long-term work that the natural resource agencies are really embarking on is a multi-year, likely multi-decade effort to really comprehensively reduce nitrate contamination in the lower basin. So as we work and implement the nitrate reduction plan, folks are still going to need access to clean drinking water, and that's really the role that OHA and DHS continue to play. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Laura.
Thanks, Chris. Chair Clem, members of the commission. Again, my name is Laura Gleim, representing on behalf of DEQ. So as Chris mentioned, DEQ is the designating agency in Oregon for groundwater management areas. This map up here, it's kind of a snapshot in time that shows the extent of groundwater quality data that we have for the area. For a bit of context, the LUBGWAMA is one of 3 groundwater management areas in Oregon. DEQ can designate them when there is documented widespread contamination above certain levels. There are various contaminants that DEQ can designate groundwater management areas for. All 3 of the areas in Oregon are designated for nitrate, including the LUBGWAMA. So Chris touched a little bit on the nitrate reduction plan. This plan is largely organized around the long-term strategies to reduce nitrate contamination in the groundwater. And it's organized around each of the main sources that the agencies have identified. DEQ's 3 main areas are up there in bold. We have land application of wastewater. This is both industrial and domestic wastewater, and this is through our state authority for permitting and ensuring compliance of wastewater facilities. We do this through a state permitting system called a water pollution control facilities permit. These kind of permits limit both the amount of water and nitrogen that can be applied to the soil, and that is to prevent that nitrogen from seeping through the soil into the groundwater. Over the last several years, DEQ has been updating all of the large wastewater permits in the area, reviewing and working to update them. And some of the items include enhanced soil monitoring, restrictions on applying groundwater during the non-growing season, and then if needed, requiring additional treatment or storage. Slide, please. The next, oops, sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit because I've gone a slide. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on the rural residential item. So another area that DEQ has authority is under permitting on-site septic systems for both large systems and household systems. In the La Guama, DEQ partners with Umatilla County implements the residential septic system permitting program. And I'll mention that while septic systems are, when we look overall throughout the La Guama, they are a small portion of the overall contamination. It's important to note that they can significantly contribute to localized contamination in domestic wells. And so that's why it's really important for homeowners to monitor and properly maintain their septic systems to ensure they're not impacting their well water and the well water of their neighbors around them. And one of the programs that DEQ has is a low interest loan program to help people repair and replace failing septic systems. We also have a low interest loan program that helps municipal systems, so cities or communities, expand or upgrade their community wastewater treatment systems. Okay, now next slide. Thank you. In the kind of science bucket that Water Resources Department also does a lot of work in, we have a significant body of work around monitoring and analyzing groundwater data. And we have a large body of this data that has been collected over the last 3 decades, 30 years. And in January, DEQ released an updated trends analysis report for a long-term well network. This is about 30 wells, so a small sample size that is spread over the La Guama area. And these are wells that we've been collecting samples for consistently for the last 30 years. So currently we sample them 4 times a year, every year. And this trends analysis report it's an update to several reports that have been done over the years, and it shows it's consistent with what previous reports have showed, which is that there is an overall continued increasing trend with some individual wells that do show it decreases. That's important to note as well. The next steps here is, this long-term well network, it is a small sample size. It's only one of the data areas that we have. So we also have data from permitted sites, and we do occasionally, we're doing right now, working on a 5th synoptic, what we call a synoptic sampling event, which is a broader scale sampling of the area. And so we have a variety of different ways that we collect and analyze data, and we're continuing to do that. The next step will be to analyze the data from these permitted facilities. This is just a graph from that report. There's a link that you can find the full report online there. And this shows where those long-term well networks, where the wells are. And then the arrows represent whether those individual wells show increasing trends or decreasing trends. The report uses 3 different ways to analyze concentrations: maximum, average, and median. Looking across these 3 different ways to analyze trends, it shows, again, an overall increasing trend in this area. I think this is the end. I just want to note that in the last couple of years, there have been a confluence of events that have really brought renewed and increased attention and resources to this issue. And that has allowed us to make significant progress. To have all of these presentations and have all of these agencies working together is really a huge step forward. And I just want to note that groundwater contamination, once contamination gets into groundwater, it takes a very long time for it to get out and to cycle through the system. And so while we've taken significant strides forward, this effort will take ongoing and continuous effort for decades to really continue to move the needle here. So thank you for your interest.
Good morning again, Kevin Fenn, Oregon Department of Agriculture. And so I wanted to briefly highlight a couple of programs that we have at Oregon Department of Agriculture, and then expand a little bit on the work that ODA has been doing related to the nitrate reduction plan. So the 2 main programs that regulate agriculture for water quality in Oregon is the Confined Animal Feeding Operations Program and the Agricultural Water Quality Program. So the Ag Water Quality Program started in 1993 with the Agricultural Water Quality Management Act, and then we got additional statutes in 1995. Over the time period from 1998 to 2001, we developed the Agricultural Water Quality Management Area Plans and Rules. The existing area plans and rules address potential impacts for surface water and groundwater. In this area, it includes the Willow Creek and the Umatilla management areas. Each of the management areas has rules that requires agriculture to allow vegetation to establish along streams that provide shade, stream bank stability, and to filter surface runoff, and where you cannot place waste where it can enter waters of the state, which includes groundwater. ODA works with soil and water conservation districts to provide education, technical assistance, monitoring, and project implementation. But it's important to understand that the soil and water conservation districts do not have a regulatory role. They do help ODA when needed to provide technical assistance to landowners for compliance issues, though. ODA has a regulatory backstop and completes investigations based on complaints, notifications from other agencies, and self-observation. The ODA staff that work in the area include a water quality specialist that covers the area. We have a monitoring specialist, compliance specialist, and then we recently hired a new lead to help with the implementation of work in the Love Guama. We also have CAFO staff that regularly visit the confined animal feeding operations in the area. We can go to the next slide. So our agricultural water quality program regulates agriculture regardless of zoning, and we regulate agricultural activities. For much of the work, we partner with the Morrow Soil and Water Conservation District, and the SWCD provides technical assistance to landowners to help address potential issues. So for each of these, for irrigated agriculture, ODA regulates irrigated agriculture under our existing rules. I'm going to highlight some new work that's occurring in the next slide, though, related to irrigated agriculture. We are in the process of developing BMPs that we would utilize to help landowners understand what we recommend for nutrient and irrigation management in the area. In addition, we're working with the Soil and Water Conservation District to complete an ag inventory for the entire Love Guama to better understand crop types and irrigation types for the area. And that helps us to better understand what the potential nutrient inputs are, and then what the potential impact from the nutrient impact inputs are. In addition, ODA's confined animal feeding operation program, they go to each of the CAFOs on roughly a 10-month rotation. So they're on those sites fairly regularly. We can go to the next slide. Currently, irrigated agriculture is regulated under our existing agricultural water quality rules. These are in the Willow Creek and Umatilla management areas. In addition, ODA has committed to new rulemaking specific to the Love Guama and nitrate pollution under our existing authorities and resources. Under our statutory authority, the declaration of a groundwater management area is one of the situations in which we can develop a management area plan and rules. And so this allows us to develop rules under those existing authorities. One thing to note, though, is that the rules that are being developed will not apply to wastewater that's applied under permits from DEQ or under permits from other agencies. For rules development, ODA has worked to do research from multiple other states, from OSU Extension and other experts in the area. We do have a rules advisory committee that's been meeting since March on a monthly basis. They'll be meeting through August to get input on the rules. The rules will include prohibited acts and then also additional requirements for larger operations. The size in which we're going to designate has not been fully determined, but that will be determined through the rules advisory process. It'll include nutrient management planning and record keeping, and we're going to continue to work with the Rules Advisory Committee and then follow the public comment process after the rules are fully drafted. Currently, the plan is to have rules in place by the end of the year, and we will have a process for public input as we move forward. Go to the next slide. In our agricultural water quality program, we've had difficulty telling the story of the work that we've done. And one of the ways that we've done this is to create what we call a strategic implementation area process, which we implemented about 10 years ago. This process traditionally is used for surface water issues and not for groundwater issues. So this is the first time that we've done this in an area to address groundwater issues. This process identifies a specific geographic area. Then we do an assessment, both remote and in the field. And then we work to address issues that have been identified. overall, the process, it includes that assessment. Then we have an open house where we invite anybody that's inside that area to come to the open house and learn about the process. There's outreach and technical assistance in cooperation with the soil and water conservation districts. And then there is compliance and enforcement if needed. There's also a monitoring component as part of each of the strategic implementation areas, and then the local soil and water conservation districts is provided some funding to help them with outreach, technical assistance, and project implementation. In the Lower Umatilla Basin strategic implementation area, you can see that's identified by the yellow area on this map. The issues that were identified were livestock access to open ditches or other surface water, manure piles and irrigation ditches through heavy use areas, and then in some instances, center pivots that were over ditches or other open channels, and then irrigation over standing water such as wetlands, and then potentially for runoff from fields. What we did was during the evaluation, we looked at 485 different areas, and we found that there was approximately 40 of those that had some potential issues. At this point, we've completed the open house, and then we're working through to make contact with those landowners where concerns have been identified. We're working cooperatively with several local producers and then other local partners, including OSU Extension and Morrow Soil and Water Conservation District. To date, or not to date, but since we started the strategic implementation area process, we've completed 8 compliance cases in the area, so 4 in the strategic implementation area and 4 outside of the strategic implementation area. And most of these are addressing irrigated agriculture issues. And then we're also coordinating with Water Resources Department in the ongoing effort related to backflow issues. So if there's backflow issues related to specific properties, we're coordinating to help address those as they come up. Thank you.
All right. So I'll give an update on some work that the Water Resources Department is doing in the Guama. In the nitrate reduction plan, these are the current work responsibility areas for OWRD. We have a robust well inspection program that we utilize around the state. Generally, we have a target of inspecting around 1/3 of the new wells that are drilled anywhere around the state. In the Guama, we set our target of inspecting 90% of all wells and 100% of all permitted wells to ensure that well construction standards are met whenever a new well is drilled or a well is abandoned or modified. We also have, much like DEQ, have been working in the Lower Umatilla Basin collecting data for many decades. So we have some ongoing work around water level measurement. We have our own well network that our groundwater staff visit quarterly. Some of the wells have transducers in them, so they're collecting 15 minutes timestamp data. So we have a fairly robust data collection and analysis process for the work we're doing in the lower basin as well. So one of the big efforts that we've been working on over the last 6 months or so is an update to a report that was drafted in the mid-90s with DEQ. The 1995 report, it's a combination of both water quality and quantity analysis. What we've done is take one part of that report and we're updating it based on the last 30-ish years of data collection that we've done in the Lower Umatilla Basin to update our understanding of the makeup of the alluvial system in the lower basin. So we have a number of our groundwater staff and hydrogeologists working on this. We have completed the initial draft of the updated conceptual model for the alluvial system. This is a draft, I was asked to say draft, water contour map that our groundwater staff have shared with me for the purposes of this presentation. The current draft of the report is going through internal peer review right now. And then sometime next month, we have a slate of external peer reviewers who will go through the work of our department. And we're hoping to have that report published by the end of October of this year. A new bit of work for our agency that we've really spent a lot of time and effort on this year is around backflow prevention. So the department has had rules since the mid-90s that stipulate if you have a well and you're injecting chemicals or fertilizers into your irrigation system, that you need to have a backflow prevention device so that if your system loses pressure or there's a change in pressure, the chemicals that you've put into your irrigation system don't flow backwards into the well and into the groundwater. It's not been an area where the agency has put a lot of regulatory emphasis over the years for a variety of reasons. When we are developing the nitrate reduction plan, our agency identified this as a program that we wanted to stand up and implement in the lower Umatilla Basin because it does have a real world impact on groundwater contamination. We've since late 2024, we have sent out 3 mailings and we've had a public open house in February. We hosted in Hermiston, talking about the rules and the requirements related to backflow on these systems. We've been working, we have a couple staff who have been spending a lot of time in the lower basin, trying to make contact with irrigators, we've developed kind of a card that we leave behind if we're not able to make contact with somebody that says, hey, you're either in compliance or you're missing these components to your backflow device, has our contact information on it so they can call us if they have any questions. So far, we've completed over 400 inspections this year in the lower Umatilla Basin. By and large, we have had to utilize our regulatory tools infrequently compared to the number of contacts we've made, but we have had to send out around 20 notices of violation for folks who we had made contact with, asked them to put a backflow device on and had not. But by and large, people are asking a lot of great questions and getting the work done to make sure their system, if they are injecting, has the proper infrastructure in place. We're hoping to come back to the commission in subsequent updates with a kind of a more robust report on lessons learned. How, if we were going to do this in other areas, how would we roll it out? Because it is to really spend the time out in the community, meeting with irrigators, because of course no system is set up quite the same, and so there's lots of questions around, well, if we did this, does that still meet the rules? And so it is a lot of time out in the field meeting with people, but we think this is a really important body of work, and we're going to continue to resource it as necessary for, in particular, for the lower basin here. So just a few wrap-up points here. There's a lot of work that we are doing in the basin and that is detailed in the nitrate reduction plan between the agencies. Our primary focus is on source control. So making sure that we're doing what we can do within our own authorities and working with the LAGWAMA committee and with folks in the basin to ensure that we're not continuing to add to the problem. So the nitrate reduction plan in its current draft is really heavily focused on those goals.
Yeah, and I just want to add, what you guys have heard today, this is a complex, long-term problem. You've heard though that I feel like the agencies are really leaning in and trying to address this and working closely. And I think one of the things that's really important is this is going to take a long time, and it's going to take resources, continued resources for us to remain focused and remain dedicated in partnership with the local community and our federal partners. We talked a little bit about EPA, but we also have federal resources that the local counties are using through the federal earmark process to do additional data. So there's a lot of coordination between all levels of government, but like anything, any complex problem, it's going to take time, it's going to take partnership, it's going to take continued resources, and it's going to take continued commitment from these agencies to keep this work up. So we're really leaning in. We're really proud of the agencies for working so collaboratively. I think we all know that there have been issues where agencies kind of have their different silos and they're working, by themselves. These agencies are really
working closely together, and the level of collaboration and sort of interagency coordination has been really amazing to watch. So I just want to thank Water Resources and DEQ, ODA, and OHA for sort of that commitment and that ability to really lean in.
So those, we wanted to make sure we left some time for questions. Those were really the updates that we wanted to provide to the commission this morning, and happy to take any questions y'all may have.
Thank you. Questions and comments from the commission? Commissioner Lee?
Yes, we see so many articles in the news about the problems with the guama up in that area, but we don't get to hear about the great work you guys are doing that you're presenting today. But I have a question for all of you. The governor's water quality groundwater management bill, Senate Bill 1154, that appears to be passing in the legislature. Do you see tools or processes in that bill that will help you further your work if you're familiar with it?
Thank you, Commissioner. This is Courtney Kroll, for the record, from the governor's office. I'm not the lead on that bill, so I don't want to talk in too much detail, but I do want to say we really wanted to make sure that as 1154 was being developed, we were taking the good work that has happened in the Guama and try and emulate that for a lot of what 1154 is focused on is new groundwater management area designations. So ensuring that we took all of the past 30 years and both, I think, the positives and the negatives, and ensuring that we've got a good process and really emulates the work that has happened over the past few years to ensure that we've got that process and that agency coordination. I think we're hopeful that, you know, as we continue to work through LGWAMA, we continue to see sort of like, you know, just issues that pop up between sort of agency coordination. And I think we're hopeful that 1154 will help us, but we want to make sure that it doesn't take away from the good work that has, or, you know, makes what we've done in LGWAMA have to sort of rehash or redo. So we've been really, you know, cognizant that we don't want to move backwards in LGWAMA. We want to continue to move forward. So we'll see, but I definitely do feel like there could be some parts of 1154 that could help us continue to move the ball forward.
Well, thank you for your good work. We just need to have more people hear about it. I think you'll be a good model for other areas moving forward.
Trouble hearing that.
Thank you.
Move to Commissioner Newman, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that presentation. It was really clear and informative and very exciting about the interagency collaboration and cooperation. That's great news. I guess I have two questions. One is, do you have any sense of why this has continued to increase? You know, why there has been such an increase throughout the area in nitrate contamination, even though you've been working on this for 30 years? I mean, is it sort of the time lag just inherently with groundwater impacts, or are there new things that have happened in the basin that have added to that problem? Because it feels like, you know, maybe we should be further along. And you know, that's not critical of anything you guys are doing. It just feels like, golly, after all this time, it's still continuing to increase in contamination. The other question is whether or not the work you've done here has enabled you to look around the state and anticipate other places where you could have similar problems and maybe get ahead of the curve as opposed to trying to catch up like we are in the Umatilla. But overall, great work.
Thank you, Commissioner Newman. I'll maybe start. You know, I think in terms of your first question, I think anybody who has been in the basin over the past 30 years has seen sort of a remarkable shift. Like, you know, we have a lot of legacy challenges. I mean, if you look back at that region, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw on that map, there's like all of the irrigated agriculture, and then there's like two giant sort of like squares where there's nothing happening. There's, you know, we have the Umatilla Chemical Depot, we have the Boardman Bombing Range. There's and since sort of World War II, there's been a huge change with agriculture. We've seen a huge increase in industrial use around both Morrow and Umatilla counties. So I think it's just sort of been a change. And, you know, agricultural practices have changed so significantly over the past 30 years. We really feel like, and we've got great partnerships with our agriculture partners on the ground to really ensure that we're doing best management practices, and we're all just kind of catching up. So I would say that's a little bit around kind of probably why we're not farther along. Is there anything you guys want to add on that?
I'll add, Commissioner Newman, thanks for the question. I guess I just want to underline that it is a really complex problem, right? And once contamination gets into groundwater, it's really difficult for it. Groundwater is slow moving and it's difficult for it to get out. I also want to note that the nitrate reduction plan that we've talked about here, it's focused on source control, controlling the source of the pollution, because those increasing trends does indicate that there is continuing ongoing contamination that's reaching the groundwater. So we really want to focus on what are those sources and how can we continue to reduce them. I also want to note that this is not an issue that's unique to this area and unique to Oregon. This is an issue that places all around the country and frankly the world are dealing with. And it just is going to take ongoing effort and resources. And I'll share a little note too, something I heard from Carlos Bonilla at the OSU Extension Center the other day. He was looking at the trends report and he said, you know, he got out his ruler and he's like, we do have increasing trends, but it's not super sharp, you know, like it's not a super steep line. And so in other areas of the country, you might see a much more steeper line. And so he's like, we're at a place where we can make progress. And it's just going to take that ongoing effort and commitment from all of the players in the area, the land users, the government agencies. So I think we are on a good path.
And I will say, in regards to your second question, I think that's a little bit of the basis around 1154 is how can we ensure that we are, you know, seeing other areas around the state which might be headed in this direction, that we can potentially step in sooner to ensure that they don't get to the level of a groundwater management area, so that we can avoid and taking some of the best practices we've seen over the past couple of years and try and avoid that. So I think that's exactly where the sort of why we wanted to move forward with 1154.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one quick thing. One of the things that I found that was the most interesting about the lower Umatilla Basin is the soils in the area is very, very sandy and very, very porous. I'm from the Willamette Valley, and so I'm used to soils where if you irrigate, there's potential for surface runoff. In the lower Umatilla Basin, you typically don't get surface runoff. If you irrigate, the potential is that it's going to go through the soil profile. And so there's been an expanded effort both on nutrient management and irrigation management. And so in just seeing how complex this area is, it blows me away how different it is in this area than much of the other areas around the state. And then the other thing I guess I would say is we are taking those lessons learned and applying them in the other current groundwater management areas in the state. And so trying to make the dial move without having to go to the rulemaking process and seeing what we can do through voluntary actions.
Thank you. Vice Chair Smitherman.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for your presentation, and to echo other commissioners, we hear a lot about it in the news. We hear a lot about all the bad, but we haven't been able to hear about all the good work that's being done, and the collaboration between the departments is really exciting to see everybody getting together to work on this issue. And you said, you know, this is an issue that's across the country. A lot of places are dealing with this, and I appreciate all the complexities, from the soil. I mean, that's a good point, right? The soils are very different in a lot of areas. And so we take that into consideration. And this could be a good model for using in other areas. And I think it was Commissioner Newman who mentioned, are there ways that we can start this process in other areas before it gets too bad. If there's a way to stop areas that are maybe we're starting to see those increases and get to them faster and start working with them by implementing this nitrate plan that you're working on for other areas. But my main question is the fertilizers and the chemicals that are being used. Has there been any studies or conversations about the types of fertilizers being used? Any conversations just about how those fertilizers are being used, and if there's been any studies or looks at what types of chemicals are being put onto the land, and if there's any way to change that?
So I'll provide a brief answer and then others may have something to add. The types of fertilizers, regardless of if it's synthetic or manures or other types of fertilizers, nitrogen's nitrogen. So the biggest thing though, looking at how they're used, we're looking at, what types of moisture monitoring are they using so they know when to apply? Are they doing tissue testing on different types of crops so they know what the nutrient needs are for those particular crops? Almost every one of the larger producers is using new methods in how they do nutrient applications. So they're splitting them up into smaller sections. So they're only getting what they need at the specific time of year. Almost everyone has their own agronomist or field person that's helping with them. They follow the land grant university fertilizer guides, which is really what we're utilizing to say if they're applying at agronomic rates. And so really a lot of it comes down to is like, are there areas where those new technologies are not being used? And that's what we're going to find through either our strategic implementation area processes or the new rules that are going to go into effect for irrigated agriculture.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, there are different methods of applying it and making sure that you're not over applying in certain areas. It's good for the groundwater and probably better for the crops too, to not be over applying that fertilizer. I also like one more comment that we're looking at backflow. I think that's really important, and something that I think a lot of people forget about and don't realize how important it can be. And was wondering, some of those backflow systems can be fairly expensive, and wondering if there's been any talk about assistance in that way for those customers that need to put on those large backflow systems. I do realize that not only is it protecting the groundwater, but it does protect that customer and that water user and their drinking water. So when you're talking to them about putting in a backflow, it is important for them to realize that this is really a protection for them as well. But just curious if there was any conversation about any help for those types of devices.
Chair Quims, Vice Chair Smitherman, great question. We don't have a funding program for backflow today. What we found, generally speaking, is depending on the size of the system that you're installing the backflow device on, there are some, what I would call off-the-shelf devices that have all the components that are outlined in rule, and those can just be purchased for generally under a couple $1,000s. I think the smaller ones are about 500. A lot of the systems in the lower basin here are larger than the kind of the largest prefabbed one you can find. And what we've found in a lot of cases is an irrigator in the lower basin here, especially some of the larger systems, often have some of the components already installed. They might not be installed, maybe they have 2 of the 3 things installed already. So it's just adding like an inspection port, for example. And we've made some connections with like local fabricators who have been working in the basin who have, we've talked with and like, hey, this is what we need to see on these systems. And then one of them just calls if he runs into a situation where he's like, I don't really know what you guys would want to see here. And so we've tried to make it as common sense as we can, given that a lot of these systems don't need a full, redo of their whole system. But there are certainly circumstances where there is cost associated with installation and the the funding sources we have available at the department right now don't contemplate backflow devices.
Okay. And maybe none of the other departments either have any
Yeah, it's
OHA maybe.
yeah, we're in a little bit of a split responsibility role here where OWRD is responsible for backflow devices only for groundwater. That's where the backflow rules exist in the well, under the well construction umbrella. ODA is responsible for broadly for surface water backflow under their ag water quality program. So we've been coordinating closely with Kevin and his team to make sure that we're addressing issues as they come up. As I understand, if 1154 does move, our department would take over kind of the full suite of responsibilities relative to backflow. And we've done a lot of work. We went to the state of Idaho and Washington to gather more information on how they have implemented their program. So we're trying to take best practices from our neighboring states and implement them here.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for all your work.
Any comments from other commissioners online? No, okay. Well, thank you for the work. I want to compliment all the agencies for their collaborative work on this. I know in many issues, we've all wanted to see more integration across state agencies. And I think this is a great example. Like to see the backflow devices, as Vice Chair Smitherman pointed out. And I know, if water supply and nitrates weren't enough, I just want the commission, the departments to be mindful. When I see things like proposals for SMNRs in the area or using basalt aquifers for carbon sequestration, we need to be mindful of whether or not these basins are already at their limits and think about, how those kinds of future potential developments could impact basins and their communities. So I just want us to be mindful of that. I know there's already enough to think about, but that's some of the things that are coming to us and important to be mindful of that. So thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we'll move to agenda item H, the Walla Walla Basin Strategic Plan Implementation Update with Chris Coitz and Brooke Beeler from Washington Ecology. Anton Keano from the Umatilla Tribes.
Good morning again. Chair Clements, members of the commission, for the record, Chris Coitz, North Central Region Manager for the Oregon Water Resources Department.
Good morning, Chair Quimps, members of the commission. My name is Anton Keano. I work for the Department of Natural Resources at the Umatilla Tribes.
Good morning, Chair Quimps and the rest of the commission members. My name is Brooke, Eastern Region Director for the Washington Department of Ecology.
So before I pass the baton to Anton, just as a quick reminder for the commission, we've been before you presenting on our work in the Walla Walla. So we're going to provide a little bit of background, just grounding for our presentation, and then spend a bulk of our time talking about the work that we've been doing since we last provided an update to the commission.
As Chris mentioned, we've been here before, so now usually we begin this presentation by reminding folks that the Walla Walla watershed is not just in Washington. In fact, there's a lot of the Walla Walla in Oregon. The headwaters are in Oregon, in fact. But By way of context, we wanted to remind the commission this morning where the Walla Walla Basin is. It's the watershed just to the north. It straddles the Oregon-Washington state line here in Northeast Oregon. It's also within the homelands of the Umatilla tribe, which you can see on this map is the dotted line. But unfortunately, the state line goes right through the Walla Walla Basin, which is, as you probably know at this point, been sort of the root of some of our travails over the decades. Slide. As I mentioned, the Umatilla tribe's homeland encompasses the Walla Walla. The tribes themselves are a confederation of 3 different bands, actually, the Cayuse, Walla Walla, and Umatilla tribes. Walla Walla is very important to the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. In fact, the Treaty of 1855 was signed in the Walla Walla Basin on Mill Creek near the present-day city of Walla Walla, Washington. Walla Walla is bountiful in many ways. Certainly one of which was the bountiful salmon runs that used to return to the Walla Walla. And as a result of this, the right to fish in the tribe's usual and custom areas was reserved in the Treaty of 1855. And it was certainly an important aspect of the treaty and continues to be today, because salmon are a critical part of the tribe's culture and subsistence and livelihoods, really identity. The Walla Walla, as I mentioned, is bountiful not just in the salmon runs that occurred there historically, but it also is very bountiful for agriculture. And this fact was certainly not lost by early settlers in the Walla Walla Basin in the 19th century. When irrigated agriculture really started being developed, it had the impacts you might expect for the rivers and streams of the Walla Walla. And by the early 20th century, many of those streams and rivers were going dry as a result of agricultural production in the basin and diversions of that water out of stream. And this unfortunately had the predictable results on the fisheries of the Walla Walla. And we saw Chinook salmon go to extinction in the Walla Walla in the early 20th century. I mentioned the importance of salmon to the Umatilla tribes and to the basin, the region's identity broadly, I think. And as such, the tribes have been working very hard to try to restore their salmon to the basin, been working very closely with the water users to find ways to get water back in stream. The tribes worked with Bonneville Power Administration, state of Oregon, to build and open a salmon hatchery on the South Fork Walla Walla, the Imtwaha hatchery. We're very excited that we're welcoming the first cohort of salmon back from the ocean this year. Very pleased to see that. I think roughly 1,000 fish have entered the Walla Walla Basin as a result of these efforts. However, as you know, fish need water, and so we really have continued to be stymied over the decades, despite the desire for the tribes and water users in the basin to work together to try to restore fisheries, restore in-stream flows. We've been stymied by that ability to manage water across the state line, and the legacy that disjunct water management has left us. And so with that in mind, I'll turn it back over to Chris to talk a little bit more about some of the water management issues that have plagued the basin over the years.
So as Anton mentioned, and as you likely know by now, the Walla Walla is a bi-state basin, which we'll talk more about how we've started to address that challenge. But as in with most areas, and both groundwater and surface water resources have been over appropriated. You'll hear after this presentation, Luke Martin, who's the water master in the Walla Walla, will give an update on some of his work up there. But generally speaking, and much of similar to the other tributaries in this area, curtailment is common every year. There are in-stream needs that go unmet because there's just not enough water to meet all of the obligations that have been put on the system. It is a dynamic basin with lots of out-of-stream needs, a robust irrigated ag community. There are 2 irrigation districts in Oregon, one large one in Washington. Obviously, lots of delicious wine is produced there, amongst other pit fruits, lots of orchards. City of Walla Walla, City of College Place in particular continue to grow. So demands on municipal water are increasing over time. And the hydrology and hydrogeology of the basin are quite unique, some of which provides opportunities for us to work with the system, and some of which provides challenges for how we think about co-managing and conjunctively managing resources in the basin. So this is a picture and a graph depicting the challenges that we currently face in the basin. So the supply and demand imbalances means that flows or demands are often unmet by junior users. On the right is a graph actually from the state of Washington that has the in-stream flow rule in black. And you can see that there are times when there's water and there's times when there's not. The river has historically went dry at various places downstream of the city of Milton Freewater. So we have a lot of challenges, but now we're going to talk about what we're doing to address some of those challenges.
You can go to the next one. So just a reminder, we have talked to you about the strategic plan and the development before, but just to set the stage, the tri-sovereigns you'll hear us say is really the three governments of Oregon, Washington, and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla. And we are essentially the conveners of this work in the Walla Walla Basin. We operate collaboratively under a memorandum of understanding. We tend to be the ultimate decision makers when it comes to recommendations for implementation of the plan. We represent our responsive governments. One of the big roles that we have is we've been directed by both of our legislatures to develop bi-state water management options. So do it together so that we have a consistent way of managing water across the state line. And then of course we direct our technical staff. When we came together to start working on a strategic plan for the basin, we had some goals of our own. We wanted to make sure that we maintained our commitment to the watershed here in Oregon and Washington. We wanted to retain the tribes and the local communities' love of the land of many waters. We really wanted to make sure we were achieving fish recovery. There'd been a lot of efforts in the past that didn't necessarily put real wet water in stream. So again, balancing that in-stream and out-of-stream use was really important to us. And then we wanted to plan for that resilient climate future where we had that sustainable and durable supply. So it all started around 2019, where we convened across the state lines in a public forum. We had federal governments, state agencies, local governments, nonprofit organizations, tribal representatives, and just agricultural community and general interested parties come together and talk about what is it that you want to see? What is your vision for this basin into the future? And so we started that 30-year planning process, and we wanted to link to those local objectives that I mentioned. Go ahead. And then COVID hit and we developed a 30-year strategic plan all online, believe it or not. It's a pretty darn good plan. It employs the integrated water resources approach. So while the main driver has often been the balancing in-stream and out-of-stream uses, we understand there are other values that the community is very interested in maintaining, whether it's floodplain management, flood control, recreational values, and economic drivers. So there are 50 different strategies and 5 different areas of focus, sort of have buckets. Go ahead. And so you'll see that our watershed strategy has identified key goals, near-term strategies that we would like to accomplish in different buckets. So we're looking at floodplains and habitat, monitoring and metering, water policy. That pesky state line is one of our biggest issues. And so managing the policy piece is an important driver, stream flow, groundwater, and water supply, and then water quality. And so the past year, we've actually been working on developing an implementation plan to implement those strategies. And we do also invest financially into the basin. So in the 23-25 biennium in the state of Washington, Our Office of Columbia River, which is a part of the Department of Ecology that is a capital program, has invested $4.5 million. That goes to some of the larger studies that Chris is going to talk about in a minute. The groundwater study, our partnership with the federal government to do a basin study. That money is paid for through our Office of Columbia River. And then we also had $2 million to pass directly through to our implementers. So that's projects on the ground that fit into those buckets that I mentioned earlier. And there are a lot of entities that qualify for those dollars. The state agencies, local conservation districts are our partners, fish recovery groups are our partners. The tribe can qualify for those funds. So pretty broad application there. Talk about, oh yeah, do you want to talk about your implementation dollars or no? I have it on the slide. No, good. Okay, go back, sorry. For the 25-27 biennium, which is this upcoming award, ecology actually got a little bit of a haircut. So we only have $2.5 million to invest in the Walla Walla, which means we're trimming down some of our operations, and then we'll have about $1.5 million for pass-through dollars. Oregon Water Resources has, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so our dollars there on the screen are all part of our base budget. So these are our operations in the basin plus our ongoing funding of projects, large scale projects that I'm going to talk about here in a few slides. But we're exploring opportunities to secure capital funds, which I don't know if we have a slide for Anton to talk about that, or you just want to briefly talk about it?
Yeah, I can talk about that. I think really the core of what we're doing, the Walla Walla, is working together and co-investment by the states and the tribes. And so you see an example of that up here. For the tribes part, we were active this legislative session and working with some of our water user partners to seek funding for the implementation of the Walla Walla 2050 plan. Through the Oregon legislature. Of course, the spring revenue forecast was not as rosy as we all had hoped. So we've tempered our expectations there certainly, but we are still working to try to seek additional funds from the state of Oregon for implementation. Hey. All right. So what are we going to do with those implementation funds? Well, as Brooke mentioned, we have our 2050 plan with a lot of different strategies. And so we really prioritize what we need to do to get the basin to the water future it desires. So with that implementation funding, we are looking to fund those highest priority projects and get them going, get them implemented. And so that's part of it. When we look more longer term, there's a lot that we can do in the interim, but it's not going to be enough. What we want to do is find a large scale project, ideally to get a lot of the water users off the Walla Walla River and to replace that water with water either from a storage reservoir or the Columbia River. I think Chris might talk about that a little bit more in a couple slides. So the first steps to do that is working with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, who is in the basin now, thanks to a Water Smart grant that the basin applied for and received. And so we're in the middle of Bureau of Reclamation basin planning process to look, essentially do supply demand analysis, look at some of the future threats to water supplies in the basin, changes in demand, and really try to formally look at what the future might hold and what we'll need to do. And this is setting us up for bigger presence by the Bureau of Reclamation in the future, hopefully to help us with this large infrastructure project to provide some more water. Because a core tenet of what we're doing in the Walla Walla is trying to make sure that we're able to keep everyone whole and recognizing that's very important to the community. And so this is, setting the stage for that broader scale project in the future. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we are pursuing a funding in this legislative session, but of course, keeping in mind that the budget position has changed drastically in the last month or so. So we remain hopefully optimistic, but realistic at the same time.
All right. We also want to continue to highlight the importance of the community that we work with in the basin. So the work that we do to implement the plan is we have an advisory committee that helps us identify and prioritize how and where to implement the plan and the strategies identified in the plan. So We have the Tri-Sovereign Group that does a lot of the decision-making at the end of the day and prioritizing how and where we work on policy, things like that. But the Walla Walla Basin Advisory Committee plays an integral role and is really what has helped us be successful in the work we've done in the basin so far. So the committee is comprised of diverse membership from folks in both states, environmental interests, irrigated ag interests, cities, other state agencies, local governments. We operate on a consensus governance system. So we work to make sure everybody's on board with the work that we're doing and the direction that we're heading. And really this is as Anton just mentioned, this is really to build a broad coalition of folks in the basin to be engaged in this work, to support it, even if their own interests may not be represented at the top of the list, to get that buy-in that this process is really good for the basin in its entirety. Also want to just touch on some of the community outreach and education that we have done in the basin over the last couple of years. There's some pictures here from some of our field trips to the hatchery. We went up to Mill Creek at a smolt release, which was a big hit for the members of the advisory committee. We've had open houses in the fall of 2023 and the fall of 2024, where we invite the community to come and learn more about the work that we're doing. Our partners have their own booths and share their information with the community. And then we've provided kind of technical updates on things like the USGS groundwater study to the community members. So we have a pretty active community engagement process. We are also able to secure or pass through some funds from the Department of Ecology to some of our local partners. And they also over the last year have held a number of different types of events. They try to get different people engaged in this process. We had a program called the Water and Wine event, where we had kind of like pub talk analog, where we had these events at different wineries around the basin to try to get people engaged in water planning and just generally the work we're doing in the basin. So lots of work in this space to try to spread the message of why we're doing what we're doing and get people engaged. Okay, so we'll get into some of the heavier, bigger topics here. The Bi-State Flow Study has been a project that has, I think it started in around 2015, but it really harkens back to U.S. Army Corps feasibility study in the early 2000s, where there was an effort to look at water supply alternatives for the basin, looking really at work in the Umatilla Basin with the Umatilla Basin Project. And can we take some of those strategies and deploy them in the Walla Walla Basin? There were runs at doing that in the past, and that darn state line just kept, it was just an obstacle that was not able to be navigated around. And so those previous planning efforts just didn't really reach the conclusion because there wasn't a way to address the state line issue and how water is going to be managed throughout the basin. All that to be said, the Bi-State Flow Study and the working group associated with that project did a ton of work looking at a number of alternatives for water supply. That project wrapped up this spring with 3 alternatives that are going to move forward into the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation process, one of which is a standalone off-channel reservoir. Alternative 1. Alternative 2 is a pipeline from the Columbia that would bring water up into Milton Freewater. And then option 3 is a hybrid approach of those 2 projects. And the intent of that, the primary intent of those projects is to emulate what has been done in the Umatilla, where the irrigators would have their water supply satisfied by these projects and their senior surface water rights would stay in the river for in-stream flow purposes. So a few years ago, we went to the Bureau of Reclamation and said, hey, would you like to join us in our planning work in the Walla Walla? And at the time, they're like, nah. So we went out and got a grant and made them join us. They've been a great, I'm joking. They've been a great partner with us. We are in the process of this basin study with the Bureau of Reclamation. We started this work in August of 2023. We're hoping to have this phase of our work with the Bureau wrapped up by 2026. This is really the foundation to get the Bureau of Reclamation and our basin into their planning process. We have long been challenged by these water supply projects, not only with the state line, but it's an expensive endeavor, and who's going to own and operate it. And because it spans the state line, the states have real jurisdictional issues with how we would manage a piece of infrastructure like that. And so having the federal government do it is really an appealing outcome for us. And so we're going to work through this process. Of course, as with a lot of these planning processes, we want them to go faster than they're able to go. But we had a really positive meeting with the Bureau in Boise a couple of weeks ago. I think, have a good plan moving forward. We're going to continue to need to find both money and time to continue to invest in this process. The next step when we're done with, this was a $2 million proposal. The next step, it's another $2 to $3 million in another 2 or 3 years. And then the big feasibility study is about a 5-year endeavor and roughly $10 million. So we have a lot of work in front of us, but this is really going to lay the foundation for us to be successful with a large infrastructure project. Hopefully, that's our goal. The last big endeavor we're in the midst of up there is a cooperative USGS groundwater study that we launched in 2020. This is also unique in the sense that we have both states and both water science centers from Oregon and Washington and the tribe all working on this groundwater study. The data collection part of the study has been completed. There's lots of report writing and data analysis going on right now. As we have experienced in other areas where we do these cooperative groundwater studies, our best laid plans on when they're going to be done end up not coming true just because it's such complicated work. So we had hoped this report would be out and published by the end of 2025. It's looking like it's going to be mid to late 2026 at this point. So 2026 is really going to be an important year for us because we're going to reach the conclusion of the first phase of the Bureau of Reclamation study, and we're going to get the final report from the USGS. So we'll have lots of data to look at and decide what we want to do late next year.
But with all the desire to do something, you can't actually accomplish it unless you have the tools you need to do the task. Well, I think that's been, one of the really incredible things about the 2050 group. It really demonstrates that we're strongest when we work together. Or how many decades did that state line stymie our efforts in the basin? And under the 2050 banner, all the diverse interests came together and we said, we need to overcome this. And so we went to Olympia and we told the legislature in Olympia, we need you to give us the authority to have the states work together to manage water across the state line. And you know what? We got that in 2023 with House Bill 1322, which passed unanimously in the state of Washington, unanimous votes in all committees in both chambers of the Washington legislature. And it gave Washington the authority to work with Oregon to manage water resources across the state line. Well, we need that in Oregon too. So we got everyone together, we headed to Salem, and we did the same thing in 2024. We had one nay vote, which saddens me slightly, but it otherwise passed with overwhelming support in the Oregon State House, giving Oregon that counterpart authority to work with the state of Washington to manage water across the state line, which was, we were jubilant, but also a little bit intimidated. This thing that we'd been able to use as kind of a scapegoat for decades, why we couldn't actually make progress, it was gone. And now the onus was fully on our shoulders to move forward and make progress in the Walla Walla Basin, which is still both, I think, incredible, but a little intimidating at the same time. Taking that same sentiment back to Salem this session, we were able to work with Representative Levy and Senator Todd Nash to pass a narrower sort of water management bill, allowing us to protect water in stream. In Walla Walla, as Chris alluded to earlier, it's a lot of perennial crops. There are a lot of orchards, a lot of stone fruit. That doesn't work with Oregon's in-stream leasing laws that were on the books before, which require you to take acreage out of production if you want to leave water in stream to help stream flows and protect that water in stream. So we had another instance where we had the will to do what was necessary. We just lacked the legal tools to do it. But by coming together and going to Salem, environmental groups, water users, tribes, asking for this thing, we were able to get it passed, I think also unanimously. So we're very pleased to have that ability going forward, and that'll help us immensely next year and provide us this tool to help restore flows in the Walla Walla. So again, I think just really testament to how strong we are when we all work together and, you know, strive to find that common good. And I think that's what we're trying to do in Washington and Oregon in the Walla Walla. So we've been working to put some of these new tools into effect, and we'll continue to do that going forward. Last year was certainly an historic milestone in that we protected water across the state line using the authorities that we got in House Bill 1322. I think first time ever that I'm aware of that we're able to manage water in stream across the state line. So really excited by that. Looking forward to doing much more of that in the future. And so what does that future hold for us? Well, as Chris mentioned, we're working very closely with Bureau of Reclamation on that long-term infrastructure project that we hope is that long-term solution down the line. You know, certainly we're going to need to do a lot of work to track down the funding for that, and we're trying to lay the framework to do that. You know, I think the theme through this whole presentation has been how strong we are in working together. So that outreach component is huge. We need to try to find water solutions that work for everyone in the basin broadly. And so really staying on top of those outreach efforts, not just to stakeholders, but to our partners, states, municipalities, counties, our federal delegation. So we're really working hard to do that and to move forward together in this partnership. And again, we're seeking money to implement those things that we highlighted in the plan, you know, confident that we went through that analysis to identify what the highest priority projects are, and that we're going to seek the funding both in the near term and then also in the long term to maximize the impacts of those projects to get us closer to that future that we all envision together that addresses our water needs. So that's where we are today. I think that is the end of our presentation. Just really want to emphasize how important it has been to have strong agency partnership and really strong presence by the state water management agencies. For many decades, the Walla Walla tried to grapple with these issues without a strong presence by the water management agencies, and having their strong, I keep saying strong, but what it is, that engagement has really made all the difference. And so I can't overstate enough how important that has been for both the tribes and I think water users and other water stakeholders in the basin as well. So would just like to leave you with that.
Just one last comment that I wanted to put in here, and I forgot when we were putting this presentation together, and that's the importance of this tributary work in the context of the CBRI and the work that our governor has directed the state agency, our state agency amongst others, to lean in and really move the needle on that effort. So this work, amongst other work that the OWRD is doing throughout the Columbia River Basin to ensure that we are meeting our obligations under the executive order from the governor, and working with our other resource agency partners to continue to meet regularly on how CBRI and RCBA, am I getting the acronyms right, Eric?
Yes, it might be helpful to explain those. I'm sure a lot of people don't know what they mean.
Yeah, I wish I would have put a slide in here so I didn't have to try to remember it all off the top of my head. The Columbia River Basin Initiative was an agreement of the 6 sovereigns, so the states of Washington and Oregon and the 4 treaty tribes along the Columbia River. It was really born out of a lot of litigation that was ongoing, and the CBRI framework allowed for a stay of litigation with the commitment that the 6 sovereigns were going to continue to work together to improve fisheries resources and all the work that goes along with that in the Columbia Basin. There was a large federal component to that, mostly around funding. So there's some uncertainty around that piece of it moving forward, but we had a meeting a couple days ago with the governor's office, and our commitment to continue to implement our obligations under the CBRI are going to continue moving forward until such time that the agreement is no longer being implemented.
Thank you.
That's all we have. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the report, all three of you. Questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Mall.
Could we get the shared screen dropped, please? Great, thank you. Great presentation, and I especially appreciate, Anton, your reminder of the treaty. I noticed that yesterday, because I think it's on your letterhead, that anniversary of that treaty was this past Monday, 170 years ago, and just getting that context and reminder, I think, is just critically important, underlying the many reasons that in-stream, especially, this sort of work really is a priority. I was able to attend to visit that hatchery 2 years ago with the Oregon Land Justice Project through the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts, and one of the things we did was also go on site, I believe, upriver on that tributary, to see an area where some pretty significant in-stream habitat restoration, floodplain connectivity work had been done, but then had gotten blown out by one of the many 100-year events I think the area has had, and that was reflected in most of your photos today too. And I'm just curious whether or not the landscape, the political landscape, the community landscape will allow for, in parallel with this water volumetric work, a lot of work in floodplain connectivity and other ways to hold water in the system and provide not just the water, but also both the spawning and rearing habitats for Chinook and other fish and wildlife.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members of the commission. Yes, that's just an integral part of what we're doing, and certainly part of the 2050 plan is that recognition of the importance of these ecosystem services that floodplains provide, not only retaining water so that we have base flows later into the summer, but also mitigating flood impacts. So the basin continues to really work in earnest on floodplain restoration projects, and I think we are certainly gaining momentum in doing that. And the tribes are an implementer of that, but we're certainly not the only implementers of that. The Watershed Council and Walla Walla, the water conservation districts are also implementing floodplain projects. So I think, that it's definitely sort of counter to the last century or so thinking that we need to, move levees back, give rivers more space, maybe get rid of levees, but slowly but surely we're trying to demonstrate the benefits of doing that. And I think we're seeing, some of the fruits of that effort, which is very encouraging, but yeah, certainly a very important part.
The landscape in Washington similarly allowing for that? I'm not nearly as familiar with the players there in terms of who may be able to implement floodplain reconnectivity projects there.
Yeah, certainly an important priority for the state of Washington. We do have several grant programs that encourage floodplain reconnectivity, and some of our basin have actually implemented, including the tribes, those programs through our Floodplains by Design, which is a big capital investment project where it takes engineering and planning to do that work. That's not the only source to do some of that. Even some of the dollars that will be passed through the Office of Columbia River can also help support that work. One thing that I don't think we noted our funding and then our legislation is the companion legislation that has been passed also allows us to spend dollars in each other state, as long as there is the ability to show that it benefits the state that's paying for it. So I think that's going to be something that opens up work in the watershed for a variety of different projects, not just floodplains.
It's nice to hear so much sanity.
Any comments from other commissioners online? Commissioner Kahara.
Yeah, I'm really excited about all the work you guys are doing and the collaboration that's happening. I think that's probably one of the more exciting things I have seen or heard about that's in my time as a commissioner. And even before that, as water conservation coordinator for reclamation. That to see this collaboration of everybody joining together is really, really important. And kudos to all of you for that.
Commissioner Newman.
Seems like a lot of trouble to do this when you're online, but I just wanted to say really good job too. It's really impressive, and to finally get a handle on dealing across the state line is really, really encouraging. So thanks for the presentation.
Vice Chair Smitherman.
Thank you. Again, just thanking the panel, thanking everyone for all the hard work. This is a wonderful report. It just again goes to show all the hard work that's being done across our state that not many people get to hear about. And I look forward to passing it along to people that I talk about to let them know all the work that is going on and the collaboration between our two states and the tribes. I mean, it's just a testament to the persistence and that we're not willing to give up on this area, and grateful to all of you for keeping this moving forward. So thank you for all your hard work.
There's a tremendous amount of work to get to this point. I remember in the early 2000s when, stakeholders were approaching the Army Corps of Engineers to do a project and a water supply project. And of course, they couldn't invest in such a large capital project with the inability to protect water once across the state line. And so we've gone through a lot of effort to get here. I want to thank a couple of people besides the current staff. Former Office of Columbia River Director Tom Tabb was instrumental in a lot of this work. I also want to thank former Senator Hansel, who made a concerted effort to make a transition to Senator Nash and help Senator Nash have a more informed understanding of the basin and try to give him a productive role and kind of a softer release into this water work. I think that was great on his part, very productive, very helpful to Senator Nash too, I'm sure, but that's helped maintain the progress and the ability to spend money across the border in a bi-state basin, and then the work to protect flows is just tremendous. So thank you all for your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just a comment on the flood risk management issue, which I know is a goal in the 2050 plan. I very much appreciate the framing of that, not flood prevention, but flood risk management. And Commissioner Mall already brought this up. The Corps of Engineers project on the Washington side, obviously, and then the flood control district in Milton Free Water. And I think it's very important that we start taking floodplain restoration approaches with and acknowledging the societal benefit of flood risk management, because I think a lot of people in the future are going to be very challenged to get insurance and maintain insurance for things like flood and fire. It's already becoming challenging in many parts of the country, and I expect it's only going to get worse. And I hope we as a commission and as an agencies can recognize that these other societal benefits of floodplain restoration, and that will be an important one. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to agenda item I, the Umatilla and Walla Walla Basin Water Management Update with Chris Coitz, Greg Silbernagel, and Luke Martin.
All right, good morning again. Chris Coates, North Central Region Manager for the Oregon Water Resources Department.
Good morning, Chair Quimps and members of the commission. I'm Luke Martin, Water Master for District 23.
Good morning, Greg Silvernagle, District 5 Water Master, Umatilla Basin.
Well, we're just going to provide some updates to the commission on some water management work that we're doing out of our local office here in Pendleton and in both Greg and Luke's areas. I'm going to give just a quick update from the work that I've been involved with and think would be of interest and is a priority certainly for me. I wanted to share with the commission. Just so you're aware, our North Central region and Commissioner Quimp's North Central region boundaries are slightly different. So I thought I'd put a map up just to ground the commission in what the North Central region boundaries are. So you'll see Greg's District 5 there and Luke's Water Master District 23 up in the Walla Walla. We were able to, historically, the Walla Walla was part of District 5 here right out of Pendleton. As we started this work up in the Walla Walla a number of years ago, we identified a significant workload that was going to be necessary to help us successfully implement all the priorities, work products that we were in the midst of up in the Walla Walla, and we were able to carve off the Walla Walla from Greg's responsibility, and we were lucky to be able to hire Luke, who at the time was the assistant up in the Walla Walla. So some of the regional priorities that I'd like to highlight, and the most significant one that I'm a part of right now, is continuing to work with the Umatilla tribes and the solicitor's office in Portland on a water rights settlement. We talked quite a lot about this yesterday at the tour, and there's just it's really an impossible process to give a short snippet and a look into the long and complex work that has been ongoing and continues to be a priority for our office to move forward. Yeah, it's hard to even know how to kind of highlight some of that work given how complex it is. But what I would like to share with the commission and from our office's perspective, being a part of the negotiating team and ensuring that we're providing good feedback and information to the tribal negotiating team and the ongoing negotiations that are happening. This process has been in various phases for the past 20 years or so. Really, in its current form, we are on about year 9. We're reaching what we hope is a conclusion on the first phase, hopefully this year. We've continued to work with Director Byler and now with Director Gall to ensure that the state of Oregon's responsibilities are being met as part of this process. Once we have an agreement on the settlement document itself, which we're continuing to work on, and what I particularly wanted to highlight for the commission is that the state of Oregon and the Water Resources Department has an obligation under statute to complete a pretty robust engagement process in the basin, which we have. We have a contractor that is working with us to develop those materials, and we're working closely with the tribe and trying to have our efforts not duplicate each other, but complement the education and outreach processes that we're going to need to do as part of this settlement. We are hoping to have our internal processes and information developed by the end of the summer, and then we'll be ready to implement that education outreach process as soon as the settlement agreement is finalized. You heard a lot about this in the previous presentation, so I won't talk on this slide for all that much time. What I really wanted to highlight is the continued coordination between the states and the tribe and our work in the Walla Walla. I think it's really an important piece of what has made our work successful up there. All the work that we've done since 2020 has been a collaborative process. So we have an MOU that the three sovereign governments have signed detailing how we work together. We jointly applied for the Bureau of Reclamation study. You'll see all the names up there of the folks who helped put that together. And then we've worked collaboratively with my counterpart, Jamie Short, who's the Eastern Region Water Resources Program Manager out of Spokane, and her Water Master, Eric Hartwig, on implementing our new authority to protect water in Oregon and essentially hand that water across the state line to Washington. And now Washington affords that water the same protection. So you see the snippet there on the right is the letter that I sent to Jamie. We basically, the state of Oregon has to enroll our water in the state of Washington's trust program. So I had to fill out an application, and so like anybody else, any other water right holder would have to, and send that to Jamie. So that was the letter that we sent to Jamie asking the state of Washington to recognize water protected in the state of Oregon. And we can't find anywhere else in the West where two states have entered into such an agreement. So I just wanted to highlight that. So a little further west from here, but also an emerging body of work for us is, we talked a little bit about the groundwater study happening up in the Walla Walla. That work is going to reach a conclusion here in the next year or so. We're getting ready to start our next groundwater study, which will be in the 8 and 15 mile drainages outside of the Dalles. That area is continuing to experience groundwater declines. We've been working in that basin for a number of years collecting data. It's near the Dalles critical groundwater area, which has been, I think that one was established in the late 60s. And then also the Mosier area, which I know the commission has been involved with some of the work that's happened in Mosier over the last number of years. So we had our first public meeting last week in Dufur. We had about 35 or so members of the public attend, where we're starting to talk about our work and our plan of study and getting public's feedback and engagement in that. We're going to go back to the community this fall with a more finalized plan of study and timeline on how and when that study will roll out there in the basin. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is just our continued work in our office to focus really on data collection, management, and utilization. So we have long struggled, as I know other state agencies have, both on how we collect data, but also how we store it and use it. We've continued to both work on our internal processes on how that data is collected and used, so we are efficient with our time and maximizing where and how we collect data, but also continuing to refine how we use that data effectively, how we share that with members of the public, how we use those data for our own purposes as we continue to manage water here locally. So you'll hear some more from Greg and Luke on some of that work, but we're continuing to look for opportunities that we hope are mutually beneficial both for the department and water users in the region. I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
So we'll start out with some Umatilla Basin statistics here. Covers Umatilla and part of Morrow County. It's almost 1.2 million irrigated acres. I'm the largest water master district in the state by double. There are 4 critical areas and 1 classified. 2 of those critical areas are basalts. They have sub areas and receive allocations every year. They're intensely managed by our groundwater staff. Those allocation programs basically set a priority system for groundwater, just like you would on surface water. So senior groundwater holders receive their allocation each year. If you're a junior groundwater user and the static water level declined in the previous 5 years, you may be cut off. So we let people know a year in advance of those numbers. So they have to let us know if they need water and how much. Umatilla Basin Project started in the 1990s due to fish flows. The salmonids had gone extinct in the Umatilla River Basin, and that was because there was no water that made it from 3 Mile Dam to the Columbia River. So those fish that were migrating up the Columbia River had no way to make it into the Umatilla Basin. It was a collaborative project with the tribes, state agencies, federal government. Everyone came together, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this, but it is a very time-intensive management program that we spend a lot of time on. There are two federal storage projects, Mackay and Cold Springs. Both of these rely heavily on winter snowpack and spring rains to fill, and it's homeland of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. Here's a map of the Umatilla Basin project. There are 28 gauge stations that we operate both on canals and within the river to manage this. 3 Mile Falls Dam in the upper left-hand corner is at River Mile 3. That was the phase 1 project of the Umatilla Basin project. If we couldn't get the salmon into the river, we didn't have a project. So they built a pipeline out of the Columbia River, and it delivers water to the head gates of the West Extension Irrigation District. And the West Extension Irrigation District then bypasses the water they would have diverted. Phase 1 was accomplished with that. That got the salmon into the river. Phase 2 came along with Stanfield Irrigation District and Hermiston Irrigation District. Through an extensive canal system and the storage allotment contracted with the Bureau of Reclamation, Stanfield Irrigation District was able to essentially trade their water, their stored water, for Columbia River water. So about middle of the screen, at the top where it says Columbia River Pump, there is a lift pump at that location that puts water in a canal and runs about 5 miles, and that serves the Stanfield Irrigation District. It's a very unique construction project because we run water in a canal in both directions. Early in the spring, we can run it out of the Umatilla River. When the flows drop, we switch over to the Columbia River and we run it the opposite direction. That is all managed by the Bureau of Reclamation. Oregon Water Resources Department's participation in this is primarily accounting, and we work closely with the Bureau to have them open the head gates and they operate the pumps. We also work closely with the irrigation districts on their demand and what they need. So here's 3 Mile Dam on the Umatilla River, very prime example. What did the fish say when it ran into the wall? Damn. Yeah. So this was our problem right here. We also run a very heavy accumulation rotation program. I believe this is unique within the state. So we read the meters from the pumps out of the river each month, and based off of your water rights certificate or allocation of stored water in the reservoir, we basically allow you to use more water over a shorter period of time. So if you allocate your live flow, you say it's 1 CFS a day, you might take 7 CFS in one day and then not irrigate the rest of the week, as an example. Next slide. Here's a picture of the Westland Dam on the Umatilla River. Fish ladders were also a priority of the project. So center of the river is a Z-style fish trap where the fish come in on the lower end, left side of the picture. And it's kind of a stairway up, back, and up and out the top. So our next project there you go. Yep, that's where we should be. With the title on top, Butter Creek. Oh, there we go. Put the Butter Creek. Perfect. So we also run an accumulation rotation system on the Butter Creek system in Umatilla County and part of Morrow County. This is primarily when the snow melts in the spring freshets come off. People want to use a lot of water all at once. And as technology's improved, people have put pumps in the creek. Those people have flow meters. Those that were flood irrigating still didn't have meters on their systems. And we have technology today that we can put a transducer in a flood ditch and come up with a rate and a total instantaneously. So we started this project about 3 years ago. Our timing was wrong when we came out with it initially because it was the middle of irrigation season. We understood that farmers needed to be focused on farming and not putting these in. So we moved our deadline twice with the official deadline of January 1st, 2025. So we give them a whole year to research the technology that they would like to use. There's multiple companies that put these out. And we ended up with varying results on how they were installed. Some farmers like to do things themselves, others just wrote a check and paid to have contractors put it in. So this is an example of someone attempting to do it themselves. It's a cheaper model. It probably isn't, we had no experience with these, and I think that's really important. It was the technology's here, but they just weren't common in the area. So this particular flow meter is an example of one that's not going to meet our requirements because it would last about 3 days. It was just very basic and rudimentary. It was out in the elements. We showed up in January to inspect these and it was laying in the snow. The battery was dead. There's no data. So we're working with the farmers to get them up to what we considered the minimum standards for a flow meter. So head gates were also part of the project. So with the Butter Creek plan that it was currently written, we spent a lot of staff time out basically doing stream measurements in these open canals. And it just became too time extensive, budget cuts were happening. And that was really also what was pushing this flow meter project. What we found is that head gates had been torn out. They didn't exist anymore. So we started requiring those. On the right is an example of a ultrasonic flow meter installed. So you have a culvert, you basically put a fish finder in the bottom of it that gives you an elevation and it calculates velocity. And so we can totalize water utilizing that. There is a staff gauge on the right of that picture, which is also used. So here's a before and after picture of a different site. This is kind of our, this is the best one on the whole system. On the left is what we used to have to measure. Assistants and myself would climb down into this ditch with highly elevated banks, and you'd stand in 4 feet of water and attempt to measure these flood ditches. The landowner didn't believe us that there was the technology to measure a flood ditch. He researched his own flow meters, and this particular company was Rubicon out of California. They came up. He absolutely loves this thing, did not think that it was possible. It gives you an instantaneous rate. He gets his exact water. That's all he wants. He's not in to trying to take other folks' water, but he just wants what he's entitled to. And he's got a meter and he knows he's getting it. And he wished he would have got this thing 20 years ago. It was a direct flow permit. So I'll pass it over to Water Master Luke Martin. Thank you.
So the Walla Walla Basin, we already spent a lot of time on this basin, so I'll try not to be too repetitive here. We're going to highlight bi-state water resource management with the state of Washington. I'll talk a little bit about our management with the Serious Water Management Problem Area designation, or SWAMPA. And I just wanted to highlight that there are no federal water storage projects in this district, which is part of the issue. There's actually no large scale storage whatsoever. Just along with this image, I just wanted to point out, it is administratively under the Umatilla Basin, but it is its own basin that discharges directly to the Columbia. There's about 30,000 irrigated acres in the district, which is, I believe, the smallest district in Oregon. So you have the biggest and the smallest right next to each other here. So we're probably gonna spend most of my time on this slide here, which is kind of ground zero for the Walla Walla River. This is Nursery Bridge, as we call it. There's a drop structure right beneath that bridge. On the right side is a fish ladder where the fish can enter. Parts of the year it's closed and they remove fish for breeding stock. the river, as you can see, gets pushed up against the right side there, the right bank, and that is a levee on the right. There's also a levee on the left bank. That levee was built in the 1950s for flood control, and it's created some issues in the channel. So we can't operate a gauge, a physical gauge on the river there. So we've set up a synthetic gauge system, which is multiple stream gauges, along with the east side diversion that comes out just above the bridge. And that gives us, it doesn't give us very accurate data, unfortunately, but it gives us pretty precise data. So I can use it on a relative scale to know when I need to go out and check the river. So we protect about 30 CFS through ACW and in-stream leases at this point. For most of the summer months, the reason I left August out of there is our in-stream requirement drops well below the 25 CFS agreement that was made between Fish and Wildlife and the irrigation district. So they still voluntarily meet that agreement requirement of 25 CFS in August. And we do help them with monitoring through August as well. We just don't have a requirement above that 25 CFS limit. As Chris pointed out earlier, as of 2024 through Senate Bill 761, or not 761, that's a separate one, but through Washington's legislature, they passed a bill that makes it so we can keep water in trust in the state of Washington. That's only for new leases though. So Senate Bill 761 is it's like a pilot project. It's a temporary bill that essentially will let the district potentially lease water and stream without drying up land. So that's going to be a big thing moving forward as far as managing that trust water along with the state of Washington. We're actively working on getting more gauges set up, improving some of our gauging system for duty limits on the districts, et cetera. So it's kind of an ongoing project with a lot of new management going on as far as all the different rules and bills that have been passed. So again, Chris already kind of covered this groundwater study, so I won't spend too much time. I mostly just wanted to point out that there was a lot of data collection with the USGS in Washington, along with ecology and OWRD. We had, generally up to about 10 staff at a time every quarter doing seepage runs on the river, measuring all the spring flows, groundwater data collection, along with our technical staff in Salem. So there's a lot of time spent, a lot of staff hours in collecting data for the project. They're right now reporting or drafting the report, and we expect results in 2026, hopefully sooner than later. It's all kind of coming together all at the same time. As Chris mentioned, 2026 is sort of a watershed year, for lack of a better term, for this USGS groundwater study. And as on the next slide, the Bureau of Reclamation flow study as well, which is also expected to come out in mid-2026. I really like this map because it shows all the different basin studies going on by the Bureau of Reclamation. And it's kind of hard to see it, but the Walla Walla Basin is on there. So it's kind of exciting. So they're right now just in the preliminary investigation phase. They're using existing data to create a riverware flow model, to do some supply analysis and determine what the next step might be moving forward. So it's just very early days still on the Bureau of Reclamation study, but through the 2050 plan and the work of the Basin Advisory Committee, there's been a lot of, this is sort of the culmination of the work they've done. So it's exciting to see that there might be a path forward for storage in the basin or some kind of exchange that might allow us to increase those in-stream flows to satisfy all the needs. So the SWAMPA, or Serious Water Management Problem Area, just an update on this. The red dots there are salt wells those all have flow meter requirements from the rules that were adopted in 2017. So all the basalt wells have to have flow meters installed. They have to be working. The yellow dots there are sedimentary wells that we monitor. So we collect flow meter readings. We get them before the irrigation season and at the end of the irrigation season. And that's just to make sure that they're using the right amount of water. It's also used by our groundwater group in Salem for analysis on kind of what the stresses are, and they compare that with the water level. So it's good data for them as well, for not just the basin study, but moving forward on how to manage the resource. We also are conducting quarterly groundwater synoptics with, again, our groundwater group in Salem. They come out every quarter. We collect a subset of data. And then I think twice a year, we do a larger set with the flow meters. So it's a lot of data collection. There's also reporting requirements. We also have staff in Salem that helps ensure that data is collected or reported by the users. They're required to report their use as well. So there's a lot of management pieces kind of moving around. I mean, 2017 isn't all that long ago. It's similar to the river. We have relatively new conserved water permits. So there's just a lot of new regulation going on the last few years to implement a lot of the new rules, new conserved water, new in-stream leases. It's just a lot of moving pieces, a lot of new things, a lot of communication with local shareholders, a lot of farmers who, maybe haven't had certain regulations before. We don't have any new regulations per se, but just when we're more actively regulating the in-stream flows on the river, there's some people with junior rights that might get turned off that in years past have not. So there's been a lot of moving pieces, a lot of communication. So yeah, that's Walla Walla Basin.
That's what we have prepared for you this morning. I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for all the work on the tours yesterday. I've been hearing a lot of very positive feedback from members of both commissions and staff and stakeholders. So thank you. I know there's a lot of work into the logistics of that, and people got a lot to see a lot of this great work on the ground, and very much appreciate the tours. Any comments or questions from commissioners? Commissioner Mall?
Great set of updates and an amazing range of work. Obviously not there because of the Rowena fire, and watching through some of the mapping software that's available. It's one of now dozens of fires that are in your basin. And I'm curious, as being from the west side, if this is just business as usual, or if you all are seeing more increase in fire and therefore changes in how people are operating or how they're thinking about the crops they plant or anything like that. Is the change in fire frequency starting to affect things that cross over into the water world there?
Chair Clements, Commissioner Mole. A lot of the large fires that we've experienced in the region over the last few years have been primarily in timber and rangeland. There was a fire up in the Walla Walla last year that did burn some dryland wheat property just east of Milton Freewater. Besides the impact to range, feed availability and the impacts the ranchers there are experiencing, I haven't heard of folks thinking about, like, from an irrigated agriculture perspective or planting perspective, that people have changed what they're planting because of fire. There may be other reasons, water availability or reliability may change how people are thinking about what they want to grow, but I haven't personally heard of fire having a large role in that.
Thanks.
It's certainly earlier than we'd like to see those popping up.
Well, I don't think there are any more comments or questions from commissioners online. And I think, again, the tour yesterday, tours were very helpful in complementing this report. So I don't think there's any further questions from the commission. Thank you for your report today.
Thank you very much.
We covered a number of items yesterday that were on this morning's agenda. Would like to take a brief break. We could reconvene at 10:15, please. In our seats, please, and we'll start up again in a moment here.
Yeah. So.
Okay, we'll get started again, and we are on agenda item L, Commissioners' Comments, and I think I'll start online, please. Commissioner Lee, would you like to go first?
Okay, finally I got off of mute, so glad to respond. I'm really sorry that I missed the tours yesterday because they would have been fabulous to take part in, but the highway prevented us from going further east, unfortunately. For the past several months, I've been following hearings on water legislation, and like Bryn, I'm really happy the end is drawing near. I think that we all need to acknowledge the Herculean of efforts of the Legislative Water Caucus. As you know, it's a bipartisan group from both the House and the Senate. And Representatives Helm and Owens brought forward a package of water bills this session that are really going to be helpful to us. So there were 183 water bills that they either initiated or followed through the caucus. And 88 of those made it through the first leg of the process. 14 have now been passed, but 58 of them are sitting in Ways and Means to see if any funding becomes available. And there are several in there that are important to us, so hopefully that will occur. There's a great work paper at the Water Caucus section of the Oregon Legislature's website that shows the cost of all the various water bills and has more detail on them, if you get a chance to look at that. On another front, I think all indications are that we're going to have a difficult wildfire season coming up. So having been evacuated a couple years ago, I have my go bags in the garage with my cat carrier, hoping I don't have to use any of that. But I know we're all watching out for what's going to happen. And I really want to commend staff for all of this work that's been done for this meeting on the IWRS, strategic planning, all the reports, excellent work. Thank you all again.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Just going on the screen, if we can go next to Commissioner Newman and then Vice Chair Smitherman and then Commissioner Mall.
Thank you. Yes, I want to echo what the other Jan said about two things. One, missing the field trip. I was really looking forward to that, and also to spending a couple days in Pendleton. So it was very disappointing to have to turn around and come back, but we weren't going to get there. And I also echo what Jan Lee said about the great staff work and the presentations. It's so helpful to hear what's going on, and I've been very impressed with all the staff reports, so it's great. I have been following the legislation somewhat, not as heavily involved as Jan Lee has, and this is not really directly commission related, but I'm working on a second edition of the water law treatise that I published back in 2011, and so it's being affected, obviously, by all the recent legislation. And it's pretty incredible to have such interest happening in the legislature. It can be a little overwhelming because it's pretty much out of the department's hands, but I really hand it to the department for being able to track all of that legislation and not completely having their brains explode. So good work on that too. And hopefully we will get to Madras in September for our next meeting without fire issues, but who knows? Anyway, thank you all very much. Great job.
Thank you,
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Vice Chair Smitherman.
Yes, thank you, Chair Quimps. I just wanted again to say thank you to all of staff. The amount of work that happens at the department is really quite extraordinary, and I don't think a lot of people, not everybody's paying attention to water issues, and I want you all to know how valuable it is, the work that you are doing. You might not get thanked every day for it, but just know that there's a lot of people out here that do appreciate everything that you're doing. And I'm constantly astonished by the amount of work and effort that goes into all of these reports. Just even today's reports and all the information on the Umatilla Basin area, and I am sorry that I couldn't be there either for the tours. I was looking forward to seeing another part of the state and understanding more of the water issues in other parts of the state. Want to just give a little shout out to Luke Martin. Hey, Luke Martin, if you're there, I'm sorry to miss you. I just wanted to say hi. I know we went to school together a while back. Again, just grateful. Hopefully we can all get together in Madras in September, and again, just appreciate all the hard work that has gone into not just this meeting, but the day-to-day work that happens at the department.
Looks like I'm up next. I always echo the thanks to the staff for what they continue to do. I found it particularly encouraging being involved in a number of collaborations with watershed councils, state agencies, federal agencies, and others. You can see when partnerships are working because there's a camaraderie that's visible among the staff that are involved from the different agencies, and collaborations are institutional, but they're also very personal. And I feel like it's a great reflection on how much camaraderie is apparent among the many collaborations we get exposure to. So thank you to Ivan and leadership for investing in those, and for all of the staff for taking them seriously and making the most of them, because I think it's probably one of the things that allows you to do the work without your head exploding. A couple of things, as I said yesterday, I do feel like we, as we're grappling with some of these more difficult issues, groundwater withdrawal, groundwater pollution, all these sorts of things, our tendency is going to be to want to sort of go easy and be understanding, and we have to, and that's part of collaboration, is the give and take. But it is important that we also sort of take the good years and the good times, and don't just say, oh great, everything's fine and we can use it up, which I do think is human nature. But I was given some extra food for thought on that, in part because we got turned around by the Rowena fire. There's a writer from England who just happened to be in Portland that night, so we decided to go to his reading. And there's a new book out called Is a River Alive? It's a writer named Robert Macfarlane. And he goes on 3 journeys in Ecuador, in India, and in the maritime territories of Canada. And in the common thread is this rights of nature movement that in Ecuador, in their constitution, in India, and in some of the regional areas, and the same in Canada, there has been ensconced in law the rights of a river, for example. And for all of the legal folks in the room, I'm sure Jan Newman, you are like, how do you do that? And I am too. And whether or not it functionally works in the system we have, it does, I think, help us it helps us realize that we either leave it in stream as a legal right or we use it out of stream as a legal right is a simplified look at how complex these systems are that we're working with. And so I think if we really can keep this in mind, that we're not just thinking about some individual's future right 50 years from now to have a glass of water or irrigate a field, but we're really keeping an eye on the systems, the land and water systems that support all life, including human life. And I just found it really thought-provoking. So I'd encourage many of you who like to do that thing to seek that book out and give some thought to it. I'll just say in our area, it's another busy field season. Everybody's trying to beat feet before the fire restrictions shut down field work. And there's some very significant floodplain restoration projects going on again in the upper Willamette Basin, specifically on the McKenzie. And it's just amazing to see the transformation that can occur when you have the capital available and the expertise of the contractors and others to do these large floodplain reconnections. And I hope that in coming years, the commission is able to meet in Springfield perhaps and take a trip upriver, because one of the, besides the obvious visible spreading of water across a floodplain all year long, and the response of vegetation and the response of water temperature and the response of in-stream critters as well, it just gets you to slow down. When you get to a place like this and the water has spread out, or if you've had a chance to go down to the Klamath, it gives you pause. And I think if anything, we could all use a lot of pause right now because we're going headlong in too many directions. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Mull. Commissioner Kahara?
I also want to thank staff and thank you for, putting a tour together and stuff that actually included another commission, another state agency. It was good to see the collaboration. It was good to hear some different ideas, different perspectives on the same projects that, we forget how much we're all tied together, and was helpful for breaking down silos. On the waterfront, what I'm seeing in Bend was on the way here. It was good to see a lot more green around Madras this year. I mean, it was the first time in many years that they've actually get to have most of their water. And so there was a lot more green fields around rather than, having most of them be fallow. So that was helpful, but then it's also been scary with all the fires already happening. We had one small band of thunderstorms blow through, and there's little, starts all over the place. So I'm not looking forward to this summer smoke season. And again, got the go bags ready, hoping we don't have to use them. Thank you, Joe, for mentioning that book. I had heard about it and I hope to find a copy of it. It sounded like a really interesting concept on how to frame how we think about water. And, yes, it's the key to all life. We tend to put it in a box as a separate inanimate object, forgetting that, it's life. Is it alive? Yes. And we need to start thinking about it that way. And that's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wolf.
Yes, I'd just like to thank the ODF&W again for showing us some of the great work that they're doing at the moment, and look at the work that the department has presented to us in this meeting, and realize as hard as it is, there's a lot of positive progress being made, and in quite a few areas seem to be at the precipice of the next phase of many years of work to get to some solutions in some hard areas. And so I would like to commend all the people that have been and are doing that work on their progress. A little bit of the OWEB front, since I'm the Oregon Water Resources Department liaison with OWEB. Just really getting my feet wet there and starting to understand the grant programs and their funding cycles and all of the things that they do on a very introductory level so far, and being on the capacity and partnerships committee and just learning what's going on there, and then dealing with the driest spring I can remember in my lifetime as a farmer. And when we needed it for the crops to grow, for April showers to bring May drought instead of flowers, and then in the normal cycle, cut hay and try to get it up dry, and then it decides to go and rain. So it would seem that the waterfront on the progress of the ODF&W and the Water Resources Department are making better progress than I am as a farmer relative to conditions. So with that, I'll just let it be.
Thank you. I have a range of comments to make today. Thinking back to the last staff report, I liked seeing the summary of the basin, but thinking of the hydrologic cycle, I think it'd be nice to add the, like the precipitation. You had the irrigated acreage, which was great, but maybe identify, if you could, break it out by surface and groundwater, and then maybe even a hydrograph of the major river, like the Umatilla or the Walla Walla, would be helpful, and just thinking about that whole cycle. On larger issues, not too surprising, but today the Trump administration pulled out of the Resilient Columbia Basin Agreement. That was an effort of the Washington, Oregon, and the 4 treaty tribes to restore healthy and abundant salmon and other fish to the basin while keeping all other interests whole. And there was a great deal of effort to ensure that there would be resource planning and resources for things like irrigated ag. We talk about the Walla Walla Basin, the need for a large bureau project to provide water for irrigators so we can leave water in stream, goals like that. So those will be even more challenged now. And I think it's really important that Oregon and the states work together and try to advance that work as much as we can. This is my 8th year on the commission. I'm terming out. This will very likely be my last meeting, so I wanted to thank a number of people, going back to former Director Byler, who encouraged me to seek this appointment in the first place. And coming from Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, it's a very different role, obviously, but it's been a tremendous honor and experience for me. Acting Director Woodcock and Director Gall, and thinking about the staff, largely when the department got more resources and was able to staff up, the department really produced, across the state and at many levels. And so that was great to see, and it sets a bar, and I think people will better appreciate that work. A couple of example projects I want to acknowledge. Annette and a number of great staff did the work on the groundwater allocation rulemaking that we went through last year. I think Tim, Jason, and Kelly are doing a great job on the 512 and the Harney Basin, and getting us, the commission, to a point where they'll be able to make a difficult but a defensible decision later this year. I have to thank Mindy, who's very patient and persistent, and reminding me that I need to respond to whether it's a calendar invite or a lunch menu, when she should tell me you're going to starve. She always reminds me to respond. And so I very much appreciate Mindy. My fellow commissioners, it's been very easy to be chair of this commission. These commissioners bring their perspectives and experiences to this decision forum, but they don't bring their own personal agendas. And I think that's really an important attribute of commissioners that are productive when we're looking at resources that affect multiple uses and multiple stakeholders. So I want to thank all of them. And I want to go back a little bit and thank former commissioners Bob Baumgartner and Bruce Korn, who I thought were tremendous to work with and also had those qualities. And I think we need to keep those qualities in state commissions in order to make productive and fair decisions for our stakeholders. And then I want to thank our stakeholders that participate regularly. There's the RACs, there's a tremendous amount of time that goes into those. Public commenters, and I want to call out a few in particular. April Snell, Kimberly Priestley, and Chris Hall are always regular participants. They're always prepared. They're always brief, and they always have constructive comments, and they're a great model for how I think people should use that public comment process. Thinking more largely about the issues and some of the examples we've seen, I think the collaboration is really important in the presence of the agencies. If you look at the Deschutes Conservancy with 40 partners, in the presence of the department, the Umatilla Basin, you look north to the Yakima Basin with the integrated plan and the presence of Washington Ecology, and then in Walla Walla 2050, with both states active in that basin. That's the kind of collaboration we need to see to make progress on these very complex water issues and basins that are almost always over allocated and are facing water quality issues as well. So I want to thank everybody in that regard and encourage more of that kind of work. And I think that's all I have, and we can go to public comment. We should have Chris Hall online. We have 3 in for public comment. We'll go to Chris Hall online first, J.R. Cook from NOAA second, and then Kimberly Priestley from Water Watch third, please.
Good morning, Chair Quemps and Vice Chair Smitherman and Water Resource Commissioners. I just would like to expound and expand a little bit on my comments yesterday that were regarding the distinction between the process by which policy and water management occur and the content that is pulled apart by sometimes competing and polarized interests. And I'd like to just quote a very small section from the Four Friends letter the attorneys Governor Kotek sought guidance from. They stated in their visionary letter, which Water League is stridently in support of, that, quote, nearly all constituencies with an interest in water, farmers and ranchers, industries, municipalities, conservation and environmental groups, Native American tribes, socially vulnerable communities, and interested Oregons who do not hold water rights are increasingly dissatisfied with Oregon's water laws and practices. And many of the residents of the state who do not hold water rights, including communities of color and low-income communities, have not had meaningful opportunities to be heard in connection with the critical issues of water supply, allocation, quality, even though they will feel the impacts acutely. The reason why I called out the exemplary work of the OWRD staff yesterday as related to the Division 512 RAC is because the RAC process demonstrated a balance between those who sat at the table surrounded by those members in the public who had many opportunities to participate and provide their input. The extraordinarily difficult subject matter did not preempt or upset the access all members of the public could have. And while many left that process feeling like they did not agree with the outcome, yours truly on some aspects, I do not think anyone could say that they did not have as good an opportunity to engage as anyone else. And I say this as a member of the public who attended all but one of the 15 RAC meetings and nearly all of the dozen discussion groups, and I've compiled thousands of pages of documents and notes and reports that are fully available to the public. And so I'd like to just put out there a request that this process be replicated and expanded upon, not just in rulemaking, but in all aspects of public outreach. And I would also say to the legislature and to legislators that they begin looking at the rulemaking process as a model for how to work with the public when they are trying to hammer out language in bills, because I think that process needs a great deal of overhaul. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share these views and greatly appreciate all the work that the Water Resource Commission and the Water Resource Department staff do every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions or comments for Chris? Okay, Jared Cook from NOAA.
Trust me, I've got a letter for you, but I'm not going to read it verbatim. We'll hit on some of the high points. So Jared Cook, representing the Northeast Oregon Water Association. Thank you all for being here. A little bit about our organization. I think a little history that I think is important to note for you all being out here, since you weren't able to see a very large component of the region's water network, which is our public water supply districts, our irrigators that are all working in tandem now to try to solve some of the major problems in the lower basin, our cities, and quite frankly, our private water rights holders. And so the Northeast Oregon Water Association formed in 2011 on the heels of then Governor Kitzhaber's effort to form the Columbia River Umatilla Solutions Task Force Declaration of Cooperation. That group was a diverse group of ag, environmental, municipal leaders, and tribal representation to come together to finally figure out the suite of tools necessary to solve the longstanding groundwater supply problems in the Umatilla Basin. As you heard prior, the 4 critical groundwater areas that we have, our water quality issues, as well as some of the return flow issues in the lower basin for Euphusia. At that time, our basin had a lot of willing private users, had a lot of willing ports, had a lot of willing public water supply districts. We didn't have a network to bring them together at a scale that allowed them to come together, open their books, figure out what we need to do, and do it in a way that does no harm both to the infrastructure needs of the tribal settlement, as well as do no harm to our land base and our economic base. And we've been attempting to implement that plan for a number of years now. And I do want to highlight some of the things that you weren't able to see out here on this trip that we would like to get you back someday to show you. In the last 10 years, our private water rights holders, we've been able to bring together over 114 groundwater rights holders that are private and over 30 Columbia River rights holders. They've come together and spent over $200 million to build 3 regional pipeline projects out of the Columbia River using the first of their kind mitigated water rights out of the Columbia. And that water is going to both offset groundwater demands, meaning landowners that have certificated groundwater rights but no longer get an allocation, or landowners that have an allocation that are wanting to get off of that deep basalt potable resource and get to the Columbia River, saving that potable resource for either drought resiliency or cities. Very significant investment. And these landowners have all taken the conscious step in being bigger than themselves, being bigger than their individual water right, and coming together to form a public district to both share and optimize that resource, as well as save very, very valuable groundwater, like you heard about yesterday in the tour, which is fossil water, 20, 30,000 years old. Every one of those systems, we've invested in NOAA approved fish screens out of the Columbia River. That wasn't mentioned today by OWRD staff. And those are in easements that go through NEPA, go through federal consultation to get that stuff built. It takes 3 to 5 years and a significant investment by that private user to make that investment. And we're at the point where almost every one of our pump stations on the Columbia River has a NOAA approved no-take fish screen. I think we'll probably be the first region in the Columbia main stem network that has all of their screens up to standard, which we see as a very, very big investment and commitment on our behalf for the resource. The biggest piece that I think is missing again is the willingness of the private and public water systems to work together to solve their problems. The cities in our region, they rely on basalt groundwater for their potable needs and growth. They're competing with ag right now because we're pumping the same resource. And at this time, these pipelines we're building, the goal is using them in the summer to get ag off of the need for primary basalt groundwater pumping, but looking at the ways that we can use those same systems in the winter for recharge and aquifer storage and recovery, either to restore the deep basalt potable aquifer or in areas that are cut off that can't be restored, like in the Torco project you guys saw yesterday at the mouth of Birch Creek. Being able to implement aquifer recharge project in areas cut off by either roads or levees or other things that would prevent floodplain function on its own. That is all coming together and all coordinated at the local level. The one thing that I will say that we strive to get to again with you all is what Core Sam said yesterday, which is building those relationships. We have a very strained relationship right now between our region, our stakeholders, and agency regulatory staff. And I think a lot of it is because we're not all at the table looking at things together. These are segmented discussions, either with the tribes, no offense to the tour yesterday or the meeting today, but there's no local panel like me to come explain to you what other things are going on. And we'd like to see a little bit more of that. On top of that, I think there needs to be another round of mediated, facilitated dialogue between our region and the agency. We don't want to fight. This basin's gone through that with the salmon wars, and this basin has a lot of history of embracing collaboration over litigation. But at the same time, we have private landowners, private water rights holders coming, opening their books, wanting to be part of something bigger, feeling like they're being persecuted right now for new interpretations of laws or others that, quite frankly speaking, I think in an open forum, we can get past and hopefully get back to a form of collaborative problem solving together with the agencies and ourselves. So thank you for the time. Thank you for being out here. We'd love to see you come back out and see a little bit more of the picture, because there are a lot of things going on at the same time in this basin, and they're all striving for the same purpose. So thank you.
Thank you, JR. Any questions or comments for JR?
I just a follow-up request, I guess, is if there's you see an opportunity for there to be some forum or something for more rebooted collaboration, I'd be very interested in seeing, well, what would that look like? Is it a day? Is it a weekend? What are the topics to be discussed? Just specifically, that would be helpful in the future to hear something like that. So thank you.
Kimberly Priestley.
Chair Quemps, members of the commission. My name is, for the record, my name is Kimberly Priestley, and I'm here representing Water Watch of Oregon. I just wanted to get up to say two quick things. First of all, I wanted to thank the staff for all of their hard work in putting together the tour. It was really fantastic. So thank you for that. And then secondly, really the reason I'm up here is on behalf of all folks at Water Watch, we wanted to thank Chair Quemps for his 8 years of service. We really appreciate the work you've done. I'll just say a few things. We really have appreciated the thoughtful deliberation that you have brought to some really thorny issues. In particular, we wanted to call out your leadership in your role as chair over the past year on the groundwater allocation rules and also the integrated water resources strategy. So thank you so much for that. And then finally, we just want to, thank you and the other commissioners for helping the Water Resources Department meet its dual mission, which is to meet in-stream and out-of-stream needs. So thank you to you and to everyone for that. With that, we wish you luck, and we're sorry that you're termed out.
I move that we disallow Eric's departure from the commission.
Second.
All in favor?
Director Gall, do we have anything else for the good of the order?
Chair Quemps, members of the commission, I do have a couple of comments. One's kind of a quick update here on the commission itself. I meant to share yesterday during the director's report, But I continue to work with the governor's office, reviewing applicants for new commission positions. Our intent's to get some recommendations to the governor soon. The next time that the Senate will be meeting for confirmation will be in September, so that's a target date for us. I think I wanted to share with you and just members of the audience there that if you'll note, 6 of our 7 commissioners actually have terms that expire during 2025. Chair Quemps is one of them. Chair Quemps, Commissioner Mall, and Commissioner Kahara are at the end of their 2nd term or nearing the end. So we're also working to reestablish some stagger in commission terms. And along those lines, both Joe and Kathy have agreed to stay on a bit longer to allow that to happen. So I really appreciate their commitment to the commission and willingness to do that while we continue to look for new commissioners. And then Commissioner Smitherman, Jan Lee, and Commissioner Wolf are also willing to be reconsidered for a reappointment there for a second 4-year term. So their commitment to the commission is also much appreciated. Eric, I heard you loud and clear on your desire to have this be your last meeting. So I've initiated the paperwork process, and that should take about 6 to 12 months to get through. So I'll let you know when that's been complete. But I wanted to touch on a couple things here. You've been with the commission since October of 2016, which interestingly enough is when our staff first started sharing information with the commission regarding the groundwater level declines in the basalt aquifers there in the Walla Walla Basin. And so you can see us here about 8 years later, continuing that effort with the science, the basin study, management efforts with the SWAMPA designation several years ago. So this water management stuff does take time. You've been chair since November of 2023. During your time on the commission, you saw the adoption of the 2017 IWRS. And as Kimberly just mentioned, you've been helping us and supporting us as we move towards the next update of that very important document. You were part of the commission and saw the adoption of the Nehalem Scenic Waterway in 2019. Part of the commission when we adopted new dam safety rules. Also the new critical groundwater area rules, or our Division 10 rules. You were part of that work there as well. And very importantly then, the groundwater allocation rules from last September there. Your thoughtful questions, careful consideration of both in-stream and out-of-stream needs have really helped guide the department in our forward process and progress. I continue to appreciate your support for the current IWRS update. All of your questions regarding the Division 512 rules, which are so important to the folks in that basin there. And then your continued support for our science and policy teams and our field staff over your many years here with the commission. I look forward to continuing to work with you in your current role at CTUIR and want to thank you for your commitment, time, and dedication to the responsible water management here in Oregon over the years you've served for us there. So, and finally, I'd just like to thank all of our staff out there who contributed to the tour, the time with the ODFW commission there. Like Joe, very sorry I was unable to attend. It's not good to see interstate closures before mid-June due to fires. So that really is a concern. But Eric, thank you very much. And I'll close down there unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Director Gall. And I remember my first task as a commissioner was a hearing in Milton Pre-Water related to the SWAMPA with Mike Ladd, and that was a wake-up call that I was no longer in an Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board.
Passing out funds.
Then I think my last act as chair is to announce that we have 6 extra lunches, if anybody would like one before you leave today. And we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all.